Summer isn't here yet, but in South Carolina, everyone knows it's coming. And for workers across the state, the heat comes with it. Summer in South Carolina is predictable. It's oppressively hot, and it bears down on you. The heat arrives every year, and outdoor workers already understand what that means. Long days, high humidity, physical working conditions that can quickly become dangerous. For many industries, this has simply been part of the job, something crews adapt to, pace around, or push through. But heat is no longer just an operational challenge. It is increasingly becoming a regulatory focus. In August of 2024, OSHA published a proposed federal standard, the Heat Injury and Illness Prevention in Outdoor and Indoor Work Settings Rule. No clue on how to pronounce that. Maybe Hiapiawasser? Anyway, even before the rule is finalized, heat hazards are already being evaluated under existing OSHA enforcement authority. On job sites across South Carolina, heat exposure is not theoretical. It's part of daily operations. Crews manage it in real time, through hydration, pacing, shade, and experience. But practices can vary widely between job sites, crews, and industries. That variability is one reason heat safety continues to draw regulatory attention. Heat exposure does not stop at the edge of a large construction site. It affects small crews, subcontractors, side work, landscape operations, and agricultural labor alike. Regardless of the setting, the physiologic risk remains the same. Prolonged heat exposure can lead to illness, injury, and in severe cases, medical emergencies. It is in response to these risks that OSHA has proposed the Heat Injury and Illness Prevention in Outdoor and Indoor Work Settings Standard, published in the Federal Register in August of 2024. While that rule remains proposed, enforcement related to heat hazards already occurs under existing authority. OSHA may address heat exposure under the Occupational Safety and Health Act's General Duty Clause. In this clause, it requires employers to provide a workplace free from recognized hazards likely to cause serious harm. For site supervisors, contractors, and project leaders, this means heat risk is not solely a worker issue. It's an operational responsibility. Understanding current expectations, proposed requirements, and the best practices help ensure crews remain safe while operations remain productive. When the heat builds, workers find ways to cope. A hose, a fan, a moment in the shade, anything that brings relief. But on the many job sites and agricultural settings, these options, unfortunately, are not likely available. While the federal heat standard is still proposed, OSHA has made it clear that heat-related illnesses are preventable and that employers are expected to recognize and address these heat hazards. Through existing authority and ongoing inspection initiatives, heat safety is already a part of the workplace evaluation. For many employers, that makes heat planning less of an option and more of a practical necessity. Because when heat exposure progresses, it can do so quickly. Early recognition and response can prevent escalation. Initial response includes moving the person to a cooler area, loosening clothing, encouraging fluids if appropriate, and monitoring for improvement. Heat stroke is different. It's a medical emergency. Being able to recognize the difference and knowing when to call 911 is essential. This should be understood by every worker, but especially those who are in charge or in leadership roles. Time and exposure matter. Heat exhaustion may present with dizziness, thirst, heavy sweating, nausea, even weakness. Heat stroke, however, may involve confusion, altered mental status, collapse, and unconsciousness. Because of this risk, OSHA's proposed framework uses heat index thresholds to guide preventative action. The first threshold occurs at approximately 80 degrees heat index. At this level, OSHA proposes basic protective measures. These include access to drinking water, access to shade or cooling areas, and the ability for workers to take a rest break if needed. Supervisors also are expected to begin monitoring workers for early signs of heat stress. For many seasoned crews, these practices are already familiar parts of summer operations. As heat exposure increases, so do expectations for prevention. At approximately 90 degrees heat index, the proposed standard introduces enhanced protections. These may include more structured rest opportunities, closer supervision, and active observation of workers for symptoms. In South Carolina, these conditions are not unusual during peak summer hours. And let's be honest, when it's that hot, it doesn't really matter who you are. The heat gets everyone. Man, Jake Paul looks rough. Anyway, heat exposure extends far beyond construction sites. Agricultural workers, seasonal crews, and migrant laborers often spend long hours in direct sunlight during peak growing season. Harvest schedules, crop cycles, and environmental conditions frequently place these workers in prolonged heat exposure. Regardless of industry, the physiologic risk remains the same. And sometimes the first signs are subtle. Fatigue, headache, difficulty concentrating, a feeling that something just isn't right. Without recognition and response, heat stress can progress. Prevention and early action remain the most effective protection. One strategy already used across many industries is adjusting the workday itself. Earlier start times can reduce exposure during peak heat hours while allowing work to continue safely. When supervisors prioritize hydration, rest, and pacing, these practices often carry through to the crew. Simple actions can reinforce a culture of safety without slowing productivity. Regardless of the setting, one factor remains constant: environmental exposure. The sun does not distinguish between industries, schedules, or project timelines. Active supervision plays an important role in heat safety. Simple check-ins, asking how crews are doing, observing work pace, watching for signs of fatigue, can identify problems early. Often, prevention begins with awareness. Heat exposure spans all trades, from earthwork to landscaping, from construction to arborist. Each environment presents different tasks, with similar physiological demands. And throughout it all, heat remains an unavoidable workplace condition during summer months. How crews adapt to it often shapes the workday. Some work environments amplify heat exposure. Surfaces like asphalt, concrete, and roofing materials can reflect and retain heat, increasing physiologic stress for crews working nearby. Over time, cumulative exposure can impact comfort, performance, and safety. Agricultural operations present similar challenges across large, open environments where shade may be limited and work is seasonally time-sensitive. Harvest windows and crop readiness often dictate work schedules, requiring crews to remain active despite environmental conditions. Across many industries, adapting to heat becomes part of daily workflow. One of the most consistent protective measures remains access to adequate hydration. Staging water in accessible locations allow workers to rehydrate without interrupting operations unnecessarily. Simple practices, frequent hydration, accessible water, and encouragement from leadership can significantly reduce heat-related risk. Preventing heat-related illness protects more than productivity. It protects the people doing the work. OSHA has identified heat exposure as a preventable workplace hazard and continues to evaluate it through existing enforcement programs. In August of 2024, OSHA proposed the Heat Injury and Illness Prevention in Outdoor and Indoor Work Settings Standard to establish clear expectations for managing workplace heat. While the rule is not yet final, some form of enhanced heat safety requirements is expected as rulemaking progresses. Developing a heat safety plan, monitoring conditions, and staging protective measures now helps improve safety and overall reduces disruption and positions employers ahead of evolving expectations. Each day eventually cools, but preparation for the next one begins long before the sun comes up.